Something like that, yes. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning to you, Richard, and to Keith. Whether he can hear me or not, I've no idea. But
Yes, he can,
he
but
can.
I just think for some reason, and I'm sure it's you, Phil, you've hacked into the system and put him on mute to stop him interrupting our otherwise perfectly interesting conversations, and I can
Yeah,
understand.
well, I do that regularly.
Yeah, I know you do.
But
Yeah,
his usual excuse is that the tech bloke had come in and done something he didn't realise that happened.
yeah,
And I've said to Keith so many times, just watch what he does and ask him what he's done.
yeah,
But there we are.
yeah. But you see, you've got the advantage over Keith and me in terms of all this listening in sort of thing, because of course you worked for many years for the Stasi, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And in
Yeah,
fact, I starred in a film. It's in the German language.
that's right. Yes,
It's called The Lives of Others.
yes. It's a very good film.
And I'm one of the main characters in that film.
Oh, well, I see you more as the landscape as opposed to a character. But anyway, yes,
Yeah, bit of background knowledge.
you are.
Yeah,
You are.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. You know, now, what's the word I'm looking for? You
I've
were
no
an
idea.
you were an extra. That's it.
Ah, yes, in true
Yes,
Ricky Gervais style. Yes.
and of course your role got cut at the end. But anyway, there we go. Um, it may well be that we won't have the advantage of Keith joining us today, albeit hopefully you can hear us. So I think we're going to do this as a duo today, if that's okay with you, Phil, and okay with everybody else.
It's fine. All I will say is the latest I can go is 10 o'clock.
Of course, yeah.
For reasons I've explained to you.
Yeah, no. I was thinking of you earlier this week, Phil, because the Tour de France Femme, the women's Tour
Yes.
de France, has been beset by this
Bra
scandal.
doping or bra cheating, yes.
Yeah, well, with women stuffing extra things in their sports bras because
For aerodynamical reasons.
I don't understand it myself, but there we go.
No, frankly, nor do
But
I.
I was just thinking, Phil, if they need somebody to volunteer to assist with checking that, I thought you would probably be the ideal person, you know?
Well, I would certainly be a good model.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And as to aerodynamics, that hasn't been relevant to me for a considerable number of years, Richard.
No, I can understand that. But there we go.
Of course, you used to be a paraglider, didn't you?
I was a parrot glider, which is slightly different. I used to glide around on parrots. Yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to canaries.
Yeah. No. Casper was harmed in the making of my career.
The minute he heard his name, then he perked up. He went.
He sometimes WhatsApps me of a night time, does Casper, saying, "Can you get me out of here?"
Yes.
I can't stand that mank.
He probably is bright enough to use WhatsApp, actually.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah. It's difficult with a wing, but I imagine he could use his feet.
Oh yes, and he's shown himself to be very skillful with his claws, I have to say.
Yeah. I suppose the only real interesting legal issue this week on the news has been the government's various vacillations about the early release program.
Oh yes.
And you know, they are between a rock and a hard place, obviously, because people like the family of Officer Harper, the chap who died in Berkshire, up in arms about the thought of people getting early release. But on the other side, there simply aren't enough prison places.
No, but I think personally they could pick and choose.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a blanket application. In other words, all right, you're not a rapist, you're not a groomer, you're not a serious sexual offender, but you are a killer.
Yeah.
But you can go. I think that they can or should be allowed to select
Yeah,
for
I suppose
public
that might
safety and confidence.
that might involve a great deal more work for our heavily overworked probation service. And what's happened to the probation?
If you mean the selection process,
yes,
or if you mean just the general release scheme.
No, the selection process.
Yeah.
But because
it's the Home Office that would, the prison service itself, surely, who would ultimately decide.
But they've got no expertise on it, have they? Somebody who's looking for release, if there's a parole board hearing, there would be a probation officer who goes and gives evidence about that issue.
Of course, but I didn't think it would be like a parole hearing.
Yeah.
But you will know better than me.
No.
I mean, if they were going to have an early release hearing for every single one, it would never end.
No, that is the problem.
So
and also,
I believed it to be almost an administrative decision per capita, per person. Of course, the latest development, as you will almost certainly know, is that the Chief Constable of Berkshire, or the home counties, has threatened legal action.
That's right.
In relation to the release of those two pillocks who were not driving the car, but were
in the car.
More than in the car. I mean, they
encouraged.
They did nothing to stop the driver. They knew that Harper was being dragged along.
Yeah.
And then their behaviour in custody. I mean, the pictures of them grinning, getting onto the prison van and stuff like that. I mean, the family must have been absolutely mortified, for want of a better word. And now this.
Yeah, I suppose, standing back from it from a moment, the fact that they were only convicted of manslaughter is actually one of the roots of the problem.
Yes, because it's still homicide.
But it doesn't bear the same tariff. And of course, as you know, it's a life license that somebody's on then. And I'm not quite sure. Sorry, yeah.
No. As I understand it, the way they've dealt with murderers who will have had a life sentence is that they have excluded life sentences from this scheme.
Absolutely, yeah.
So murderers aren't going to get it either.
No, but just looking back at that trial, what the jury were thinking, or how it is that they came back with manslaughter verdicts, I find difficult to understand.
Well, that's a polite way of saying what I thought at the time and mentioned last time we were on air.
Yeah,
it was an absolute travesty.
Yes.
And there was that obvious suspicion that one of these, cocky lads was blowing kisses at a juror or something. Now, you told me that there'd been an investigation and the judge had ruled all of that out, but there was something very sniffy about all that.
No, there certainly was. And I suppose the judge felt obliged to say something because of the amount of publicity there was about that issue at and around the court and amongst those who were watching the case. But he wanted to square it off to say, there is no evidence of this. But whether he regrets that decision now, I don't know. But Anyway, whatever.
Quite so, because it's done. It's
Yeah.
done. The verdicts, however crazy to me, are there.
Yep.
The Crown chose, I don't know whether they could have appealed on any grounds, really, but they didn't.
No. I suppose the only basis would have been that, nuclear.
Unduly lenient?
Well, not necessarily a manslaughter. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the problem. No, you're not wrong, Mr. B.
No. But the only thing they could do is go for the nuclear option of saying, we think one of our jurors was nobbled by a defendant.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, but that really is a nuclear option, isn't it? That's But anyway, there we go. Right, very sad circumstances. Philip, I thought today, if this is okay with you, that we talk about expert evidence in the Crown Court.
Yeah.
And most people who come to give evidence in the court are either direct witnesses of the alleged offence, or in certain circumstances, they can be somebody to whom a complaint has been made within a reasonable period of time after an offence, in order to say, well, this person's not making this up 2 years later because they told me 2 hours later that this is what had happened to them. So those are the sort of witnesses of fact, I think we call them, wouldn't we, Phil?
We would. Yes.
And most witnesses fall into that category. But then there's this other separate category of witnesses, expert witnesses. Now, could I invite you to tell us what, it may be obvious, but for the purposes of the Crown Court, what an expert witness is?
Yes, well, you have to establish, and there is strict law on this and case law, you have to establish that this witness is actually an expert.
Yes.
So the criteria are that, or the criterion really, is that the person you wish to call as an expert must have in his or her possession specific special knowledge that is beyond the knowledge and expertise of an ordinary juror or even a judge.
Yes.
So that's the criterion.
And obviously, by definition, therefore, they're not eyewitnesses or anything like that. They've had no actual
they are
role in that way. They come
they
to
are
it
removed from the facts.
Yes.
So, for example, an obvious example in a homicide case, the pathologist.
Yes.
And you and I have come across many of those. The pathologists are obviously experts because your ordinary juror and even judge, and certainly we as barristers, do not have the expertise of being a specialist physician able to give forensic evidence in a court.
Yes.
There are, of course, borderline examples of so-called expertise. And I've been trying to bring to mind overnight examples of that, because I have come across them whereby, particularly in psychological cases, I mean, I told you all about that case in Swansea called the Cardiff 3 that I did.
Yes.
Now, in that trial, we were eventually, for the defence, allowed to call a now preeminent psychologist, a specialist on the subject of suggestibility in suspects.
Yes.
Called Gisley Johnson.
Right.
But in those days, and I'm talking 1989, 1990, this was new territory. And certainly at the first trial, the Crown objected to Gisley's evidence, saying he was not an expert.
Yes.
Almost saying that, all right, this is sort of psychological, but what is this nonsense about suggestibility?
Yes.
So that's one example that springs to mind where there's borderline, and you have to. So in a sense, the newer the concept, the less likely it is that expertise will be accepted.
Yeah, and my experience is that the areas of expertise that are accepted by the courts and therefore the expert evidence is admitted, in fact, do expand.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
With more and more.
It's organic.
Yeah,
The more it's used, I mean, Gisley Johnson, sorry to beef on about this, he is a classic example of how somebody who was looked down upon, I mean, the second trial judge in his summing up, the only summing up in the case, referred to him as the good doctor. Now, you and I know what that means.
Yes.
It's classic British understatement for more or less contempt.
Yeah, it's very pejorative, yes.
Absolutely. And yet now, you know, I don't know whether he's retired as an expert himself. He probably has now. But, you know, his books are the primary source for this sort of stuff.
Well, you know, an example of what you're describing is one that I can think of, where I prosecuted a chap in front of a judge, well known to us, a former member of my former chambers, now retired. And we had very good CCTV of the person who had committed, it was a jewellery shop robbery and an attempt murder of the manager, who ran after the bloke, who ran down this narrow alley in Horsham, and very, very narrow. And then he turned, the manager came down the alley, and he shot at him, and it was a sort of an improvised, it was a gun, but it was one that had been modified. The bullet hit his mobile phone in his breast pocket and didn't kill him. But anyway, we had a chap who we said did it, and we had quite good CCTV of him. And the prosecution produced a report from an expert in facial mapping, doing the sort of trigonometry, if you like, of where is the nose in comparison of the eyes to the chin, that sort of thing. Lots of lines over and putting two images one over the other. And my judge there refused to allow that evidence in, because he said, this is a matter for the jury, it's for them to decide whether it's the same person, and therefore it doesn't require expert evidence. He wasn't doubting the expertise of the chap who'd been instructed, but he was saying this isn't an area of expert evidence. Now, I think nowadays, so that's 15 plus, well over 15 years ago, I think nowadays that evidence would be admitted.
Yes,
I think that area has become a recognised area of expertise.
Well, it leads us on to facial recognition now, doesn't it?
Completely, yeah. Which is obviously used enormously, sometimes evidentially and sometimes simply as background information. Because, you know, what police love to have is that they've got sort of they've got stuff that they can't use as evidence but shows it's this person, and then they can go back with the knowledge of that and look at other things that are evidence. But
Richard, I recollect a case I prosecuted at Croydon.
Yep.
And this is some years ago, before a recorder, in other words, a part-time judge, still a barrister as well. And she allowed me to call 2 police officers who had looked at material, who knew the defendant because they dealt with in the past. And she allowed in, despite the defence objection, their evidence as expertise as to the recognition of the defendant.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's expert evidence, well, it is, because their ability to recognise the defendant was not within the knowledge or the experience of the jury.
Yes.
So you may agree or not, but to me that would be, and usually that would be expert evidence.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they weren't witnesses as to the fact. They didn't arrest the man this time.
You remind me of a case that I did in Lewes. I was led by Camden, and it was a chap who killed a prostitute, and the prosecution were able to rely upon CCTV from the Lewes Road in Brighton of this bloke crossing over the road with quite a distinctive gait. And Camden, as ever, made rather good progress in showing that this wasn't evidence of anything at all. And the problem was then that he called the defendant, who walked from the witness box in exactly the same way.
That is brilliant.
You can see the jury thinking, yes, that's him. But you just on...
Now, by Camden, you mean a very eminent... Well, he was a QC. He would now be a KC, but he's retired.
Yes.
Camden Pratt.
Yes, fantastic barrister. Yeah.
Absolutely.
In terms of experts, they do have obligations, don't they, in terms of giving their evidence? They're not.
They have very strict obligations.
And they have to sign a sort of a whole series of, I promise that this evidence is this, that, and the other, and I'm not giving it in order to assist the party who has instructed me.
No, I'm there to assist the court.
Yeah.
And although my opinions are obviously subjective, they are presented objectively.
Yeah.
Irrespective of which side call me.
Yes.
Because both sides can call expert witnesses.
Of course, yeah. And of course the defence can obtain a report and then not, in the criminal court, then not use it at all.
Yes. So the scenario you are describing is that the prosecution, for example, submit the evidence of their pathologist. Let's say it's one of these horrible baby shaking cases.
Yes.
Which are a nightmare to prosecute or defend.
Yes.
But pathological evidence is absolutely critical.
Quite.
Because then these poor kids, they're not stabbed. There's no obvious cause of death other than usually dreadful injuries to the brain, the neck, and so on. So that's a very ripe area for, in my view, disagreement between experts.
Yes.
And I did at least 2 cases where this was precisely the case.
Yep.
So the Crown served their evidence with a pathologist. It would be in the body of the committal evidence, the bundle as we would know it. The defence then get their own expert.
Yep.
To prepare a report in writing. But as you say, the defence if their expert agrees with the Crown, they're not under any obligation, as I understand it, even now, to disclose their report or call that witness.
You're quite right. Unlike the prosecution are obliged to disclose any report.
That's right, because the burden of proof is on them.
Yeah, and in fact, in the family courts, where baby shaking cases come up as well, of course,
Right.
things like that, there is an obligation on any party who obtains a report to disclose the report. So I remember from my days of doing family cases, it would be an interesting debate as to whether you actually instruct an expert or not.
Well, I can imagine that's quite a Hobson's choice, really, because because what you're really saying is, if you commission a report in family proceedings, you need to make damn sure initially that report is going to help you.
Yes.
Because if you get a wrong one that you have to disclose,
yes,
you've gifted the opposition an extra string to their bow, haven't you?
Yeah. It's interesting to me because we've been talking about pathology there, and in particular the baby shaking cases. At one time, it was considered, certainly in the family courts and suggested in the criminal courts, that if a baby had broken ribs, bleed on the brain, and petechial hemorrhages, which is bleeding
the eyes.
in the eyes, those three put together is determinative of the fact that it must be an abuse case. Now, there's been a significant retreat from that since then. I know it sounds horrible, but it is actually relatively easy to break a small baby's ribs. They're very narrow, thin bones, and the petechial hemorrhaging doesn't necessarily indicate shaking, and a bleed on the brain could be as a result of a traumatic birth, for example, where, as I'm sure you know, the fontanelles are still open, and so the parts of the skull actually close in on the baby's brain as it's delivered, because otherwise it simply wouldn't come out. This is in as it were, a normal birth, and that can occasionally cause little bleeds on the brain that nobody notices and has no effect on the baby in later life, but could just sit there. And then if the baby is medically examined sometime later, there may be signs of it.
Precisely. I think there's understandably been a retreat, as you say, from that trilogy, as I would call it.
Yeah.
But I think the key to the strength of the argument, which I would still rely on if I were prosecuting, I couldn't state it as a credo, but it would be the sheer weight, the combination of all three in a particular time frame.
Yeah.
Is how I would approach that.
Yes,
it's pretty overwhelming stuff.
And sometimes, for example, you'll have a baby who has various fractures which can be identified as being as occurring at different times. So one's significantly healing, another one isn't, and that's more indicative of it being abuse, because to break a baby's rib once might be unfortunate, but for it to happen 2 or 3 times is probably indicative of abuse.
Yes, well, the most recent and frankly disgusting case, of course, which ended up with one of them getting a whole life sentence, were the same-sex men in a marriage, I think, who purported to be ideal for the world, adopted this poor child, and gave it 4 months of utter misery and abuse.
Yes.
And the accomplice, the partner deserved more, but the main man got his whole life sentence. But these are very traumatic cases. Now, you recently, I know, have read a book purchased for your good self by your lovely wife to do with the skull or bones generally. Is that right?
Bones generally, yeah. It's by Professor Dame Sue Black, who is
Sue Black, right?
Leading authority on bones, really, and signs of injury on them, and how those might have been inflicted. So she works with pathologists who deal with the whole body.
Yes.
But often human remains are found, bones are found with no other parts on them. And there needs to be an analysis to see how that body has found its way to where it is and what caused it to be a body as opposed to a living person. And it's fascinating stuff that she talks about. I'd strongly recommend, I think she's written 3 books, and I strongly recommend them, I have to say. She writes rather compellingly, and so she's, in fact, she calls herself an anthropologist, and so she's not.
That is what she calls herself. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's not a pathologist who deals with whole bodies, but she's brought in to deal with the bones.
And I think you told me that it's chapter by chapter. So, for example, when we last spoke on the phone, you just finished the chapter on the skull.
Yeah, I've read it all now, and so she just goes down the body, and talks about how from the bones you can often determine age, you can determine sex, and a whole range of other things. Even if you can't extract DNA, which is a separate issue, of course.
Yeah.
And that's another area of expertise.
That brings us on very nicely to that very, very subject. And I don't know what it's like now, but certainly even when I retired 3.5 years ago, even then it was a point of conjecture about whether it was 100% reliable.
Yes, I think it's probably got over that. I did one case where, as junior counsel for the Crown, I was invited to go to Culham, where there's a huge forensic set of offices and laboratories, and met with the sort of senior bloke there who dealt with DNA. And I learned so much from just sitting listening to him. So, there's ordinary DNA testing used to be called STR14.
Yes.
Because you take 14 places on the DNA sequence, always the same places. And it was thought that if you had 14 matches, then that was the same person. And the normal figure they come out if they've got there is it's 1 in a billion chance.
Yeah, that was the standard numerical phrase. Yeah.
Yeah. And now they've introduced STR17, which oddly enough, as you can imagine, deals with 17 sites. And so if you've got all 17 sites, it increases it well over 1 in a billion. It's sort of, because there are several billion people in the world, it takes it to the point where there can't be anybody else on Earth who has this same sequence that we find on these 17 sites.
Well, that's quite a claim, isn't it?
Yeah, and then he also explained to me about Y chromosome testing. So this is a separate test where you look at the male DNA and take a profile of that, and then it's possible to match that against a male person. Sometimes not even the person themselves. Sometimes it might be their father or their brother.
Yeah.
But chances are they will share that same Y chromosome. And the other is what's called mitochondrial DNA, which is the equivalent for the female segment, but we all carry it, in fact. We carry it from our mothers. And so women carry it all the way down the line. If you're a bloke like me or you that's it. But if you've got STR17 and the Y chromosome link and mitochondrial link, then it is simply impossible to argue that it's not the person. Now, the only issue with it, Phil, I think nowadays is continuity. In other words, that whether there's been some contamination.
Yeah.
So I don't think defences nowadays actually challenge the science, typically, but they will investigate.
It's the integrity of the samples.
Yeah, how the police collected them, how they were stored, things of that nature, all of which are desperately important. But it's a fascinating area.
If I may just interject there.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
My wife, Jackie, is an avid watcher of programs of a level of interest, and she's currently watching it's on iPlayer called Murder 24/7.
Right.
And Murder 24/7 is.
I imagine that's what she thinks about having been married to you for so long. But anyway, yeah.
Well, no, that's murder by 38 years.
Yeah, quite.
But and there are many times she's been tempted, I can assure you.
Yeah.
But no, Murder 24/7 is not. It's not a drama. It's actually real life stuff.
Oh, right.
From arrest through to conviction.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff has come up in these programs that she's told me about. I mean, for me, it would be like a busman's holiday, but she's fascinated by this stuff.
Yeah.
And how careful she was observing, how careful the evidential officers are.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, the advances you're talking about in DNA samples, testing and conclusions, again, I go back to the Cardiff case. It was a new DNA search of the murder scene after all those years.
That got the fella.
They got better quality samples.
Yeah.
Because their techniques had improved so much. And they found the killer within a fortnight. Purely because his DNA was on the national computer.
Yeah. I did I did not me personally, I prosecuted, is what I should say, a rape up just on the Sussex-Surrey border. And the suspect was a fellow who was a young chap who was over from Greece, who was staying with his family here. It was horrible. It was country area, young 16-year-old walking home, attacked and raped. And his defence was, it wasn't actually me that was in this country. It was my twin brother.
Aha, the old. Sorry to laugh.
No,
It's normally used in driving offences.
yeah, it was my twin brother, and the family over here said, well, you know, we hadn't seen them for a while, but we thought it was him as opposed to his twin. And we, the prosecution, did contemplate, and they put the funding in place to have a full DNA profile taken of him and his twin. Because apparently, albeit identical twins start with the same DNA, complete profile. In fact, over time, you know, just randomly, there are changes that occur. And so you can, in fact, with a full profile, even tell apart.
You can tell the difference.
Two identical twins, which I hadn't appreciated at the time. It was enormously expensive then. I imagine it's significantly cheaper now. But in fact, we had fingerprint evidence, which of course isn't identical between identical twins, and we got it. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to mention something that I always found very funny, and then we'll move on to fingerprints, which, of course, at one time were really the only way somebody could be identified, apart from ID parades and visual ID. But my older son, Charlie, who happens to be getting married 2 weeks on Saturday,
congratulations,
his two
Charlie.
closest friends are identical twins.
Yeah.
One is called Charlie, the other is called Sam. I won't mention the surname. And they all went to the same school, which was the Bishop Luther School in Chichester. And to this day, I cannot tell the difference between those twins.
No.
And what used to happen at school was that they decided to be very naughty and go into each other's classes as the other twin to confuse the teachers.
Yeah.
And they were never rumbled.
No.
They are so alike. Now, my son, Charlie, thinks he can tell the difference. But there we go. He's known them for so long. But there have been times when one or other has visited us here at the house, and I've immediately called them by the wrong name.
Of course, yeah. You know, as you know, Phil, this last week I've been up to Oxfordshire to wedding of one of my twin nieces.
Yes.
And I can just about tell them apart nowadays. But when they were children, I simply couldn't.
No.
And I'd go and visit and I'd say, right, which one are you? Right, you're wearing the green top. Okay, good. And I would have to remember them that way.
Yeah, it's when they wear identical clothes that you've had.
I know, yeah.
So, fingerprints now. Now, both you and I will remember the days when it was an entirely manual process.
Yes.
And there was a member of the bar who I respected hugely, so much so that I've now forgotten his name, bless him.
That's probably
But he became a barrister, but he had been a Surrey police fingerprint officer.
Right.
And he was instructed on defence work almost constantly because of his then expertise, not as a witness, but as a barrister. But of course, that's now taken on a whole new, it's a totally new scenario in the sense that, right, so you will have done it yourself. Recently, my wife and I went abroad to an EU country. Because of Brexit, we're no longer part of the EU, and they have this entry and exit system, whereby you have your photo taken, you have all your fingerprints taken, so they know that when you leave and the same process applies, that you've not exceeded your 90 days. And that's all done in a matter of seconds.
So
Whereas in the
is
old days,
yeah,
in the old days, it was literally putting your fingers and thumb
go ahead
individually on an ink pad and then pressing your digit down to record the fingerprints.
And rolling it slightly so you get the edges as well.
Rolling it slightly.
No, I'm just showing you my phone.
Yes.
The way I unlock my phone is I use my right index finger, press it there.
Yeah. Yeah, Jackie does that.
And it recognizes my right, if I were to lose my right index finger, I wouldn't be able to use my phone, but there we go. And sometimes, for example, if my hand's wet,
hopefully that won't happen.
Won't recognize it.
But
no,
and the old
I did have a neighbor. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Phil. You're frozen on me.
Yeah, no. The old system was the fingerprints are called whorls, aren't they? Because they're
there are whorls on them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is where it goes round and round.
That's right. And as you've said, everybody's fingerprints in some way are unique to them. Yeah. And the test used to be, I can't remember, originally it was something like 16 points of similarity. And then rather like your description of DNA, it went up to 18. And then I think it went high as 24.
I had a neighbor who worked in IT when I knew him, but before that he had worked as a fingerprint analyst.
Oh, right.
So he wasn't a police officer or anything like that, but he worked for the Home Office, comparing prints with each other. So it wasn't computers in any way used. It was a human analysis. And he told me about the level, not just the level of training they had, but also the refresher courses they had, which were incredibly frequent.
Yes.
Just to make sure that they were up to speed on what they ought to be doing. And if they didn't pass that, then they're out on their ear. Which, of course, can be a product that is sometimes the shape of an ear can be used. If someone's put their ear against a flat surface, a print of that can be taken.
Yes, and as indeed footprints.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of ways of identifying not only a person's appearance, but the clothing, the footwear, and so on.
Yeah, as I understand it, in that cottaging case where you were a defendant, it was that they, in fact, took a large print of your bum. I think
yes, and it fitted a photocopy that I'd taken in office many years earlier.
I think it's the only time when there was an ID parade where the suspect and the other people on the panel had to stand facing the other way. Yeah. But,
it's the opposite end to facial recognition.
It is. Fecal recognition, it's known as. Now, there is just a general thing about experts, which I think is always of interest, because we as lawyers, you're in the Crown Court, it's slightly stressful. You want a yes or no answer. You want to know, is this right? Is this not right? Experts want to give a much more nuanced answer.
Absolutely. Well, they're like politicians.
Well, I can understand it, because they say, well, that could be the case, but we can't guarantee it. So an area like that's vaguely interesting is bruising, because there was a time when people like pathologists and indeed other doctors would say this bruise is 3 days old because it's now yellow. It's not yet got to the purple stage or the green stage, but it's definitely 3 days old. They don't say that anymore.
No, they don't.
That's been sort of discredited as necessarily the case, because different bruises heal at different rates and on different people. And so it's virtually impossible to get a medic to date a bruise, other than they say, well, I think this bruise occurred before this court case started. And you think, yeah, well, that's probably helpful, yeah. And the other ones who always frustrate me is very occasionally you do get bite marks on particularly on bodies. So somebody has been bitten in the process of an attack. And it's virtually impossible, if you're ever thinking of doing this, that a bite to a human's flesh will leave marks and bruising. But unless the person doing the biting has a particularly weird set of teeth, gaps and that sort of thing, no dentistry expert will say these match this defendant.
No, you need something very unusual, out of the ordinary.
Yeah,
like the defendant's gait in the Camden case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
which I think is one of the funniest stories I've heard in years. How did you? I mean, it must have been like Del Boy and Rodney.
Oh, it was just
watching the chandelier drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, how you kept a straight face, the pair of you. I mean, Camden was very good at keeping a straight face.
Yeah, and we were true to our profession, in that neither of us had said to him before, "Can you just walk a bit differently?" That's not sensible to say that, or professionally.
Well, I think in the physical sense that would have been even more disastrous. But there we are.
Yeah. Can you hop into the witness box, please?
Yes. Can you? Yeah. Can you do a Dudley Moore on us, please?
Yeah.
Now, Richard, I'm afraid, running out of time.
I know you are.
So I am going to bid you and the man and his dog, not necessarily Jed, farewell.
Okay. Well, we've got through a fair amount of material there, but so for example, we haven't touched upon road traffic collision experts, drugs experts. I'm sorry, if I might just say, Phil, just the last point. It's always a challenge if you're the barrister, because you're having to cross-examine somebody about effectively what they've done all their professional life.
Yes.
And, you and I aren't experts in whatever the field might be. Usually, you might have the opportunity of having a like expert sitting behind you, so you're equivalent, but it's still very tough. I remember I prosecuted a chap who was making lots of designer drugs, lots and lots of them, and I had the head chemist from the Forensic Science Service, as it then was, sitting behind me, and I was cross-examining the defendant. I turned to this fellow, and he said, "I don't know," he said, "this is beyond my knowledge, what he's talking about now." Wasn't the most helpful thing to say to me, but at least he was honest and said, yeah, this is not something that we come across, because these are all these new different designer drugs. I don't know.
That's honesty for you, Richard. And on that note,
yes, on that
I will
note,
leave you and hopefully see you this time next week.
very much so, and very best wishes to Charlie. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'll pass those on. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye, everybody.